What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Free Toaster News Podcast. I am Carlos Caro, your host. I'm here with Free Toaster co-founder Nick Madrid. If you're not familiar with the Free Toaster, we're a newsletter at the intersection of consumer lending, marketing, and technology. We publish every single Wednesday, and we curate from a selection of thousands of stories that we review, and we pick just a handful to put in front of you. Before we get into this week's story, I want to just thank our sponsors, Bulldog Media Group, Spinwheel, and Fintel Connect. The headline this week was Apple just put buy now, pay later into 65 million Apple Pay wallets. We noticed that this was released, I think, about a week ago, and Apple now has a feature where when you select your credit card to make a purchase, you are asked to either pay in full or pay in installments. It's a very clear visual. I'll actually show it to you here in a second on the screen. I think there's a lot of implications here for lenders, but before we get into that, Nick, you dug into the backstory and the history here with Apple's what they used to call Apple Pay Later. Walk us through what you found.
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. I'll quickly give you the timeline that I found interesting, and then maybe a few of the takeaways we can unpack. And Apple Pay Later was a highly ambitious experiment where the tech giant really just tried to bypass its banking partners to become a lender itself. And I found some stuff primarily through Bloomberg, where in March 22, what we dubbed the secret initiative. And behind the scenes, reports surfaced that Apple was working on something dubbed Breakout. The goal was to bring many of its financial services in-house. And before this, Apple's financial services like the Apple Card were backed by third-party banks like Goldman Sachs. And also, to help make this happen, Apple acquired a UK-based startup earlier that year called Credit Kudos, which used bank data to make lending decisions. In June 2022, there was a bigger announcement where the public first learned at Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference that Apple unveiled Apple Pay Later, the brand new features in the iOS 16 OS. It was buy now, pay later service directly built into Apple Pay that would allow customers in the US to split costs of any transactions into 4 equal installments spread over 6 weeks, something that we know pretty well. But the real game changer was the underlying structure, where Apple created a wholly owned subsidiary called Apple Financing LLC, which had all the necessary state licenses to make this happen. For the first time, it was Apple making the credit decisions and handling the loans through Goldman Sachs and MasterCard, retained smaller roles just to issue the payment credentials. On September 22, there was a delay where Apple originally expected to launch. However, really trying to integrate all this underlying technology and running their own credit checks, I think they realized it was maybe a little bit harder than they thought. In March 2023, the rollout begins. They finally started rolling out the service tied to the release of iOS 16.4. It released a pre-release version to randomly selected users whose lucky users could borrow anywhere from $50 to $1,000. October 2023 was the general availability. It finally reached to everyone in the US. It also noted it began reporting these loans to the US credit agencies later in that fall. But then June 2024, so just not that far out, 9 months later, there was an abrupt end. Apple acting as his own, lender just stopped on June 17th, 24. They made a surprise announcement where they were shutting down Apple Pay Later. Just over a year of operation, they announced a major retreat. And, rather than taking on the loans themselves, I think they decided to partner with established lenders and banks. And in the US, Apple applied for loans through companies like Affirm, Citi, Synchrony, and Fiserv. And we were just trying to think through, why does this matter so much, right? Why are we talking about Apple Pay? It's kind of a fun, we're blending payments into our ecosystem, which we never really did before. And I think one of the big takeaways is, as lenders, you need to view Apple Pay as a distribution channel. And you and I were talking about this before. I would love for you to unpack that a little bit more, Carlos.
Yeah, it's funny because I've been in the card industry for a long time, and I'd always viewed, and I still kind of do to some degree, if I'm being fully honest, as buy now, pay later, as this little thing that's happening but doesn't really matter. That's kind of how that's been my mental framework. But the more I dig into buy now, pay later, the more I'm seeing there's a generational thing. And now it went from not a niche e-commerce thing to offline. So before I answer your question, Nick, a couple data points caught my eye as I was digging in here. One is e-commerce only accounts for 13% of all US commerce and transactions. So that Apple just opened up 83% of that transaction volume to buy now, pay later, which I think is huge for the Affirms of the world. The other thing, interesting data point was on a purchase volume basis, buy now, pay later is still tiny, 1%. So 99% of purchase, and I'm looking at the world like through it's either card or buy now, pay later. I'm excluding cash. So I was running research in Gemini on percentage of purchase volume through cards versus buy now, pay later. So it's kind of like a 99 to 1 ratio. I think this Apple move by itself could really start to change that ratio rapidly over the next couple of years. But to your question on why is it a distribution channel, lenders for a long time have been fighting for what they call share of wallet. So it's not enough to just get a new customer, but you have to get them to spend on your product regularly. And issuers I've worked with always look at what percentage of their customers are top of wallet, i.e., how often is their card the most used out of any of the products that they have? And there's bureau data you can look at to figure that out. And consumers historically have only thought about, or at least in my view, rewards as the predominant driver, maybe APR to some degree. So they're thinking about rewards for the most part when they're making a purchase decision. You're at Walmart, you're at Costco, you have a couple cards to pick from. You pick the one that you think is going to generate the highest rewards for you. This feature Apple just rolled out, I think, changes that equation considerably, especially for the younger generation that's a little bit more comfortable with the buy now, pay later format. And revolvers, people who need a little bit of cash flow management, who would rather put a big purchase on 4 installments, because now Apple is offering the option of pay in full or pay over time right there at the purchase decision. So they just killed all the friction that used to be there. You used to have to log into your credit card and decide if you wanted to do a pay later type of option, and now you can do it at the decision point. So the lenders and the card issuers specifically are competing on a basis of not just rewards, but on financing. And Nick, you mentioned the players that Apple announced: Affirm, Klarna Citi, and Synchrony. So I'm already wondering, where's Chase? Chase is their co-brand partner. I imagine it's only a matter of time before Chase pops in there. Where's Amex? Where's Capital One? Where's Wells Fargo? There's a number of brands that I think make sense as potential partners for Apple, because they've clearly moved away from the exclusive partnership route, which you mentioned kind of was their history. They're now in like a marketplace model. So I think this is going to be another battleground. Like if you compare Karma is a battleground for new accounts where all the issuers are there fighting for attention. I see the same thing happening here, but on a purchase by purchase basis, based on all these factors.
Absolutely. I think I have 2 more takeaways for you in our audience. The second one is, transaction volume in Apple Pay is only going to accelerate. And, you and I were talking about this earlier. It's probably going to accelerate like rapidly. And so there's 2 main reasons that we kind of enumerated. One is why we have this story, which is just the reason why we're talking about this is that buy now, pay later is now directly there through these seamless third-party integrations. So naturally, we think that transaction volume is going to go up. But the second one is even more interesting, I think, and it's that how AI is really going to make it easier for consumers to make much smarter payment decisions, which you alluded to before. This idea of agentic commerce, it's going to aid in what to buy, how to pay for it, how to finance it. I mean, that is where this is going. Like, last night I bought a plane ticket. I'm going to Hawaii. For whatever reason, I bought one way there on United with the United card, and then one way back on the Alaskan card on Alaska. Why couldn't an agent do that? I'm sure it could have done it for me. And that's just one example that I did last night that I'm like, this makes total sense to me. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think if I'm a lender these days, or I'm a financial institution, I actually have, well, the customer I'm serving right now is human. It's obvious. But the customer I'm going to be serving in 5 years, definitely in 10, are just bots. I think people are just going to be putting their bots to work. I don't imagine anyone like what you just did last night, Nick. I think that's gone in 5 years. I think someone's going to pull up their phone, give a voice prompt to their booking bot. Someone's going to win the war for the app that's the best at that. Maybe it's Kayak, maybe it's someone else. And you're going to say, hey, I have a bunch of United points. I have these 2 cards. Get me from San Francisco to Oahu, round trip. These are the dates. Get me best bang for my buck. And just do it. Don't give me results. Don't get, just within my constraints and parameter. And it's going to ask you, hey, Nick, you didn't tell me how early is too early for that first flight. And you're going to say, oh, yeah, nothing before 7 a.m. I don't like to wake up early. Okay, well, how late are you willing to come back the next day? Well, nothing later than 10. It might ask you some follow-ups, and then just going to do it. And that's going to happen in payments. So I think consumers are going to start building accounts with credit card issuers so that when the bot runs off, it has like more choices and more to choose from. So I think this is going to I think it's a scary place, candidly, for many card issuers, because many of them rely on consumers not behaving rationally and perfectly. And it's a question. I forget who I heard say this, but a thought leader in the industry said, "Hey, if with perfect information a customer wouldn't use your product, then you have a really bad product, because that's going to get exploited over time with these agents and with technology." And I think it's a really interesting way to start thinking about products. But Nick, I think this is the start of a long story we're going to follow over the next several years.
I hope so. And to this third point, I think Apple, they're uniquely positioned to control this foundation layer of this new economy. And to go a little bit deeper, probably outside of, over my skis, is, thinking about identity as the ultimate control point, and how, by them owning credentialing and identity is probably the most critical point in this agentic economy. And they're already some of the developer docs, they're already well far to solve this problem with digital passports and state IDs, even with international ID integrations with Verify with Wallet and passkeys. The latest iOS update expanded the use of passkeys across the entire Apple ecosystem, enabling passwordless biometric sign-ins that are highly resistant to phishing. I can't help but think, what you just said about of these issuers, to date we've been, marketing to humans, but now we not only what does marketing to a bot mean, for one, and what is about developing a product to a bot in another one, and how are they doing this right now? I really want to unpack and understand that, a bit more.
Yeah, no, I think your point on the identity layer. I think that there was, I think people in the industry caught that news earlier this year, and everyone recognized very quickly, oh, Apple's doing that so that they can be the foundation layer for agentic commerce. And then what we're seeing today with the pay later, it's clear that payments is on their mind, and that's important, but also lending is on their mind, and they've chosen now to partner instead of be the provider. But I think Apple's going to be a very heavy player in consumer finance for years to come, because they have the entry point with the user today. Nick, 2 quick stories before we wrap today. It's related on the same thread on companies that are building foundational layers for consumer finance. We covered this in the Free Toaster. If you're not subscribed, you can check it out at thefreetoaster.com for our weekly news roundup. The headline is Intuit and Anthropic partner to bring trusted financial intelligence and custom AI agents to consumers and businesses. So most of our audience probably thinks about Intuit in the context of Credit Karma. There was no mention of Credit Karma in this press release from Intuit. They mentioned TurboTax and QuickBooks, partnering with Anthropic to integrate automatic agents into its software for mid-sized businesses. What I found interesting about the story, Nick, is there was a press release not too long ago from Intuit in their partnership with OpenAI and ChatGPT. And this story, so I was a little surprised they released another big release, but now with a different model company or AI company. So it's clear they're hedging their bets, and they haven't taken a side on who's going to be their ultimate provider, but it looks like they're leveraging OpenAI in a different way than they're leveraging Anthropic. And the partnership with Anthropic goes with the more agentic route, which I found more interesting. The other story was with the Experian marketplace. They launched an insurance marketplace app on ChatGPT. And I found their choice. I didn't find it surprising that they launched an app inside ChatGPT, because I think everyone's moving in that direction. What I found interesting was their choice of category. They chose to run with auto insurance as their first, which tells me there's a lot more openness in that community to run agentic transactions and to put products in front of consumers in that format, versus lenders, many of whom I've spoken with firsthand, who are kind of worried and scared about the compliance ramifications, the UDAPs, the fair credit, all these regulations that prevent or that really guard the consumer against false advertising and misleading claims. Lenders are very nervous about that. So I thought it was smart Experian went the auto insurance route. But I'll be following that story closely. Hopefully we can unpack that one more in a future episode.
Great. Nice chatting, Carlos.
Yeah, good to see you, Nick.
All right, bye.